Okay. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play some chess. I'm reminded now. Get water first. Okay. Game in 5 minutes per side per game. Hey, hey. to get the win there. Was really upset by the game before that. This opponent played fair, but and what I meant to say was this opponent and I played a great game. I did not feel that way about the game beforehand. In the closing moves here, I saw my opponent gain time in a game which included no increments. This was gaming 5 minutes per side per game. How is he getting suddenly about a half second to a full second of time added to his clock after taking 3 seconds to move? In his time scramble, nonetheless. Yeah, he had me on board for sure here, but go back a few moves. We were already in a time scramble. I had him on board. It's just frustrating to lose that way. You don't like to see that, you know. It's more often, we're chess players. We're playing chess. We're more likely to want white to win a position as obvious as this. And what did I play? Okay, so my opponent played correctly. Queen takes c7. It's not quite as obvious. I thought I was about to get a second queen and then mate, but my opponent played the right move here. Queen takes c7. Accurate for a while. And here I made a mistake. I thought I could. I tried to get him on clock when maybe he was a little bit too bunched up like that. Let's see what the best move here. Torch says rook to b1. Envisions knight to d7 next, then h4, e5. Rook back to d1, and there's many ways for white to continue with strong major pieces in a very open endgame board. And material advantage to boot. Let's see what went by. Yeah, I lose the queen, and then the scramble's made more difficult for white. And right around here, my opponent was deemed worthy of additional time in these last moves here. Alright, and then we'll probably go over this game in full detail. If it's accurate, I'll go over this game move by move. Accurate enough. Let's review this game move by move. d4, d5, bishop to g5. He wants me to play f6, or to be like, oh, I gotta get my knight out and block any attacks that could occur on the h4, d8 diagonal. Double my pawns. Knight f6 is not a great move here. We'll start with that. Knight to f6 is not a great move here. F6 can be played, and Torch finds it the best move. I played c5, which is also booked. And then capturing towards the center, pawn takes d4, and knight takes d4. It's a game, you know. Black has clear lines of development. And White has a existing lead in development. But Black can gain some initiative by f6 at the right moment. And there's always a possibility for some sort of natural blunder like bishop f4 followed by e5, and then the pawn at f6 protects against bishop takes e5, then the bishop is lost. The pawn at e5 captures one of either the knight at d4 or the bishop at f4. D4 was a bit optimistic, extending Black's pawn chain maybe a square too far. We see here that Queen h5, one of the purposes of playing earlier when White played bishop to g5 is to induce pawn to f6 and weaken the h5 to e8 diagonal for attacks on Black's king by White's queen and White's f1 bishop moved to e2 in preparation for a similar diagonal attack. And so this is exactly what happens in the game. Is that? Oh no, that's not what happened in the game. I saw this as the correct, as the move put forth by Torch as the correct move. So my opponent played a little bit more slowly, maybe seeking to get this castle, that he does castle shortly thereafter, the very next move. But yeah, I agree with Torch here that bishop to e2 is a miss. The queen h4 was stronger than either my opponent or I had deemed during the game, as evidenced by our gameplay. This opponent is choosing his moves wisely. Meaning that castling kingside is so often a great move, even greater than getting entangled in some kind of tactical and difficult to calculate kingside attack and its defense on my part. Might have been just a little bit wiser to put your bishop on e2 and then castle like my opponent did. So yeah, Torch says queen h5 was better, and it was. This is also fine for blitz play, to have a safe king and then calculate after that. Yeah, and this trap I set this as a trap at this moment, seeing that I would have two pieces on the knight, and the inaccuracy part of kingside castles is that the knight, I can capture the pawn on e3 and have also the threat of queen takes d2 where I win a piece after all exchanges. Alright, and then, so best move here is probably f takes e3. No, no. Best move here might be something like knight to f3, retaining the piece. Yes, there might come a queen swap on the d file. And black will get in the move e takes f2 check, and thereby have his pawn advantage secure. But the move f takes e3 is tempting, you know. From white's perspective, we open up this now half-open file for our rook with some really quick bishop moves, which have to be met by black in some way. Then maybe there's also time to sneak a queen in behind that bishop, and we've got all these pieces. You know, two bishops, a queen, and we're just streaming into black's uncastled, semi-exposed king position. That's so. Yeah, f takes e2 is tempting in that way, that it regains the material. So that's also a part of this. And it looks like white could muster a strong attack. There's even, you know, the kitchen sink method. The rook on a1 could even become a part of an attack on black's king here. Those thoughts of an attack like that are put to rest by queen takes d2. Now, exchange of queens is just not good to be a full piece down, and white could play to b1 to try to like move out of the way, but then there's queen takes e2. You know, just none of these moves are working for white here. There are I see three moves for white, and then maybe keeping the queen solid is considered some kind of other move. None of these work well. So exchanging is, I believe, correct. What Torch thinks that exchanging is only good. So, you know, that exchanging is good and only good. Envisions bishop h5 check. Then if I block with the g pawn, then maybe his white's queen can skirt away to f3, g4, or e2, right? So then bishop h5 was better than the alternatives. And a3 is considered almost as good as bishop h5. Bobkiss. Alright. Pawn to h3, hitting at this, putting this question to the bishop who's too busy to care. And we trade queens. Black and white trade queens. Probably look at a takes d1. Then white has enough time. White has the initiative back, actually, with bishop to c5 escaping the a3 threat, and if b4 follows, then there's bishop b6, and there's or even better, not even bishop b6, sorry, and that position bishop takes e3 check, and white cannot compensate for the material deficit. Black will win this game after simplifications and trades. So we find, you know, it's not always that easy in the moment, so we'll follow the rest of this game. Like I said earlier, how that last line ended with capturing the pawn with check. It's just kind of like a real bummer. If you're thinking on white side, like I can get a nice clean file open for my rook on the d file, then bishop skirts out of it, gaining even more material, while also pretty much putting the king in the corner. If the king doesn't go into the corner, then it's more trades or even exchange sacrifice. This is a game that speaks to a fair amount of material deficit on white's part. And I'd say some other factors, like black has a lot of space, command of space, so it's just not working here for white. Clock is just about even between the two players, with neither player being in extreme hurry. Queens are off the board, so black's king is safe, even though he has not castled yet. Alright. Bishop c6. So here I considered normal developing moves for, well, I considered the alternative developing move for black's g8 knight, and that is knight to e7. Where he could perhaps end up at d5 as a midway out, as an outpost midway on the board. I thought more imperative than that was to get this bishop into a position where he's taking command of a large scope diagonal that the bishop on e2 can't challenge, or at least not easily, after the c8 bishop has moved to e6. Right? It's first come first serve on the it's first come first serve here at the g8 a2 coffee house of fine chess and diagonals. So I said, hey, go get some coffee. That's not me. I don't actually drink coffee, but what? I used to. It doesn't matter. So here, this is an interesting moment. How badly does black want to exchange pieces? You know, I think maybe I stretched that desire a little thin, metaphorically speaking, by bishop g5. So I agree with Torch's evaluation here that this puts black a little flat-footed. These pawns are now doubled on the g file. We're opening up a semi-open file for white's f1 rook till it's now a completely open file, and not only that, one with attacking potential against black's king in certain lines to continue. So, but it's also not the end of the world, right? Bishop g5. I believe my opponent and Torch and I all agree that bishop takes g5 is white's best response. Black responds again, and alright, so we've got our material trade. Maybe we can stabilize these pawns with a move like h6. I will tell you, those will stable. You see how these are on the screen here? Those pawns will. That's how doubled pawns can be stabilized. And there's not even all that much hurry. Black has enough coverage on the vulnerable squares on the d file, or at least most of them, and from a direct attack there are pieces in the way, on the way to black's king on e8. Yeah, and I think so. This is after the bishop exchange, and then this move, rook d1. For me here as white, the most imminent threat are trades. Bishop to c4, already threatening against the exchange, and any kind of fix of that threat that I can see anyway leads to a trade on e2. And then there's less material on the board than earlier, and black's 4-point material lead looms ever greater. Right, as discussed, trades on the e file here. Black loses the e5 pawn, which is to note that that is again the price sometimes of simplifying material. Bishop for bishop there would also keep black away from any type of defense on his pawn at e5. The king on f8, relatively speaking, is fairly safe. The most important square for the d1 rook is covered by the black's knight. And pinning with either the d1 rook or the e5 rook, that's a little scary, except that black will always have in that event g7 to recapture the knight. So you could even throw like a bishop or two in here, and maybe black has to scurry out of the way to some far off land like b8. I don't know. This is all hypotheticals type stuff. But the knight on f6 is actually really well grounded, as he's covered by g7. So to unseat him, black would have to lose the exchange and a pawn, or just the exchange. To unseat him, white would have to lose the exchange on f6. That's all. So this position shows that black can have awkward king safety. And then one last piece on that is rook e7, of course, covered by black's king, but just to make sure that's the case. And there's attacks. It's a fairly, there are a lot of angles here, this attack. Rook d1 to e1, threatening rook e7 check. And I think best rook is rook e8. We note now that black is strong enough on the e-file to counter attempts by white to double and attack along the e-file. This is a fairly complicated demonstration of the fact that black's king is safe on f7 at this juncture, and made safer still by the fact that it's black's turn to move, so the initiative can't hurt in this position. Now white spies opportunity for forks by black spies opportunity for forks by black's knight, and soon enough those come to be, and the game is just lost on the account that black has one more rook than white. And isn't even nice now that with rook c8 to c7, black can defend the only two pawns that were not as strongly defended earlier. And like I said, this zigzag movement on the G file and the H file is very strong. The other rook can be left to put pressure on white's own pawns. Just some simplifications. A move like rook d8 here just simplifies things for both parties, but to black's embetterment. The white king is not going to be able to team up with his rook on the c file. Maybe I could have let that happen, and then when the rook take with the queen, and when white's rook plays rook takes c5, then black plays rook takes c5, and there's no chance for, so white gets the better out of that material, but there will still be this rook that is now on d8 to hassle and accumulate material on the king side. Trying to find, searching searching furtively for the mate. Rook d4 was fine, and then my opponent, mostly for lack of any good move, where's my opponent gonna go? And moves into this, plays king e7, and it's checkmate after rook to e4. Checkmate. All right, not bad. I enjoyed that game. I enjoyed going over that game. I hope you all, my Gravitrons and other viewers, enjoyed that game with me. It was a reasonably accurate game. So awesome. All right. Well, Gravitrons and other viewers, thank you all for watching. I'm More Gravity. Have a great night.